Around 25 years ago, I prayed to Babaji and was shown my path. Here's the story. So, we're talking early 2002, January 2002. At that point, I had been meditating for many months, 4 to 6 hours a day, not with any good method. Well, some good methods, but it was probably needlessly difficult, and I was very difficult on myself. I was, getting up at 3 in the morning and taking cold showers, and I was in high school. This was my last year, my senior year of high school, and it was a trip. It was wild to be something of an ascetic, in high school, in one's home. It's the things you don't always think are gonna go together. A lot of lunch breaks spent of skipping the food or in meditation. A lot of fasting happening in those days. A lot of fasting mixed with exercise, which is a crazy combination. If you can believe it or not, I was once kind of Gandhi thin from all that. And then at some point, and I think it was probably in November, maybe it was probably November, sometime around then, my sister and I decided to start a metaphysical society in our little town of Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. And the first person we invited, and we both thought, to invite them first, ended up being my first brother-in-law. Maybe a year later, after that, something like that. Anyhow, he did a particular practice called Ascension meditation. I had my own stuff. It seemed that it was working very well for him. But I wasn't profoundly curious to find out more. I could tell that something very positive was happening when he'd meditate. In any event, that was, nothing brought me into that. Fast forward, at some point he'd borrowed me this book here, Autobiography, not this exact copy, no, but this book, Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda. And do check it out if you've never read it, if this is your thing. It's a wonderful book. And of course, like thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people, just reading the book was profoundly transformative. I mean, it hit me. Even just reading the book, because there are no meditation practices in it, just started opening things up for me. So now back to January 2002, I couldn't find the passage in my cursory search. I know it's in there because you come to a certain point when, in one of the chapters in which Yogananda is mentioning Babaji, who is purportedly an immortal yogi. And one of those passages, Yogananda makes a promise, essentially, a pretty bold promise. He says, whoever prays to Babaji, basically it'll be heard. And I thought, I don't go in for, I don't really believe in those sorts of things. And I don't think, direct prayer had ever, I don't think it had worked for me all that much at that point. But it was worth a try. And so I, decided, okay, when I do this, I'm going to be in my deepest point of meditation, which typically would happen in my evening, nighttime, couple hours of meditation near the very end. And so I found myself in what I thought was the sweet spot, kind of quieter, calmer. The prayer just went up from my heart because I had been searching around, getting brochures from different monasteries and ashrams of all sorts of different traditions. I'd been emailing them, and they would send me these very pretty often brochures in large manila envelopes. And none of them quite were sticking, like none of them quite had the resonance. I mean, if I was gonna go all in, I wanted to go all into something that made all the tumblers click internally. I think I would. I was pretty sure that I would know, when I found it. So nothing yet, and so hence the prayer to Babaji. The prayer was essentially, I know I'm not tuned into my sadhana yet. I know what I'm doing isn't the thing I'm supposed to be doing. I could use a little help. And of course, to my surprise, as soon as I put that out, immediately there was something of a response. initially it was as if there was this honey being poured in the top of my head. That's the best way I can describe those initial moments. Extremely pleasurable. The next, there was kind of like I'd say like a mix of honey and electricity, in a sense that the top of my head was, in a delightful, pleasant way, extremely porous. So we're talking like something like a big crown chakra opening, if you want to put it into that nomenclature. Delightful. And there was a profound clarity and crispness up there, which was also extremely pleasurable. The next thing after that was a sense of this kind of ball, again, like a ball made of honey and electricity coming down, into my head. And with that also came a message, and basically the message was, I've heard you, and here's a frequency. And at which point I was experiencing, again, a really delightful, I have to call it a frequency. I could call it a musical pitch, but I'm not quite sure it was, taking place on the level of the ear. And so, but it was a pitch, a definite pitch. I'd never really experienced that pitch ever in my life before. It was delightful, clear, very expansive. And basically it was, now pay attention to this pitch, because the next time you hear it, that'll be your clue. That'll be, and that was the word, your clue. And then, transmission ended. I was very skeptical. Yeah, I still am, actually. It's like, at first I was like, okay, well, could be my imagination, could be some, dodgy astral entity, could be a non-dodgy astral entity, could be Babaji. I was, and still am, very much in suspension, more and more practical in my approach. But so there it was, and I let that go. And then it was either a day or 2 days later, and I don't remember which. A day or 2 days later, I was coming home from cleaning up cigarette butts from around my downtown area of my little town. And as soon as I hit Park Row Boulevard, my home block, as soon as I made the turn onto that, I could hear the pitch. It was there. I was like, oh, interesting, very subtly. So I was like, well, And then as I moved down the block, it got a little bit stronger. And just as I was making the turn on the sidewalk to go to my house, my sister and future first brother-in-law popped out. And as soon as my brother-in-law started to speak, it went pretty high in there. And that was interesting. And the gist of it was that they were going to be going to an introductory meditation class in his practice up in Michigan. That class had been canceled, and now they were going to go to one that was happening in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and coming up this weekend. And of course, the question was, hey, would you like to come? Now, in those days, I was very famous for saying no to just about anything. Not because I was mean-spirited, but because it took a lot to do 6 hours of meditation today and go to school and do a bunch of other stuff. And so I was really parceling my time out in really small packets. And so it was yes. Out of my heart, one of the largest yeses of my life. It was as if yes was speaking through me and not me speaking yes. That sort of thing. And I was still skeptical, but forward to the weekend, I get in that class. I try the meditation practice out for the first time. Within a minute, I was in the deepest space of meditation that I had been since, well, deeper than any meditation I'd been in, but the deepest sort of state of consciousness I had been in since my near-death experience of several years before. And I went with that, but I have to say that elusive, kind of vague, in quotes, music that I had been searching for, it was as if the entire orchestra, metaphorically speaking, was there. And it only got thicker from there. Because I was still skeptical. I was like, well, let's see, are there practical benefits? Am I fooling myself in some way? X, Y, and Z. And each step of the way, it kept kind of getting better. And I was really taken the next morning when after the class, 6 a.m. Monday morning, we had driven, at 5 p.m. Sunday, all the way from the Twin Cities down to Lake Geneva. I think we got a speeding ticket. It's going pretty fast. And next morning I was, as usual, bright and early up, and there was my dad, and he not in a malicious way, but he tried to push one of my buttons, and it was gone. I was so surprised too. And he tried again, and it was absolutely gone. And so then my dad said, maybe this new meditation's a good one. So, and indeed it was. So whether that was Babaji or not, I'm very thankful for that wonderful synchronicitous bit of prompting that entered. And I will say that it doesn't hurt to ask. It doesn't hurt to put a message out from the heart. Whether one receives a potential message from Babaji or not is somewhat immaterial, especially when if you're in deep meditation and something comes out from your heart. That's actually a wonderful, wonderful combination. So it was lovely to be with you again. And if you like that video, check the other ones out. Give this a like, subscribe. And actually, I generally am very interested when people leave comments about similar experiences that they've had, or, I suppose, dissimilar. I'm having trouble replying to all the comments of late. The volume has been pretty high. So I do my best to get to as many as I can. Anyhow, it was lovely, and have a wonderful day.